Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Rama Rama. Premanande Hari 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 Bol.
Vaiśeṣika Maharaj ki jai.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udhiraye. Today we're continuing our reading in the Srimad Bhagavatam. This is Canto 3. And chapters 12, creation of the Kumaras and others. And today's prescribed verses are 52 to 56, if I'm not incorrect. Leaves one left over for somebody tomorrow, I think. Is that correct? 52. Evam yukta kritastasya daivam chavikshitastada kasya rupam abudveda yatkayam abhichakshite. This is about Brahma. While he was thus absorbed in contemplation and was observing the supernatural power, two other forms were generated from his body. They are still celebrated as the body of Brahma. The words are evam, thus, yukta, contemplating, as in he was connecting to Krishna in his service, krita, while doing so, tasya, his daivam, supernatural power. Cha also, avekshita, observing, tada, at that time, kasya, of Brahma, rupam, form, abhut, became manifested. What became manifested? Dveda, twofold, yat, which is kayam, his body, abhichakshite, two forms came from his body. Purport. Oh. The two bodies came from the body of Brahma. One had a mustache and the other had swollen breasts. No one can explain the source of their manifestation. Therefore, until today, they are known as Kayam, or the body of Brahma, with no indication of their relationship as his son or daughter. 53. Tabhyam rupa vibhaghabhyam mitunam samapadyata. Tabhyam means of them, these two forms, rupam, form, vibhagyam, thus being divided, maitunyam, sex relation, samapadyata, perfectly executed. Translation is, the two newly separated bodies united together in a sexual relationship. 54. Yastu tatra puman subun. Yastu tatra puman sobun Manu Swayambhuva Swarat Striyasich Chatarupakya Mahishyasya Mahatmana. Out of them, the one who had the male form became known as the Manu, named Swayambhuva. And the woman became known as Shatarupa, the queen of the great soul Manu. Tada maitunya dharmena praja yedam babuvare. Thereafter, by sex indulgence, they gradually increased generations of population one after another. And 56, reserving 57 for tomorrow. Sachapi Shatarupa Yam Panchapatyan Yajivanat Riya Vrat Tod Tanad Hadao Tisra Kanyash Chaparata Akutir Devahut Tishcha Prasutir iti Satama. Sahimanu cha also api in due course Shatarupayam unto Shatarupa Pancha 5. Apadyani children Ajivanat begot Priyavrata Uttanapada Tisra 3 in number, Kanya, daughters, Cha also, Bharata, O son of Bharata, Akuti, Devahuti, Cha, and Prasuti, iti thus, Satama, O best of all. The translation, O son of Bharata, in due course of time, he, Manu, begot in Shatarupa 5 children, 2 sons, Priyavrata and Uttanapada, and 3 daughters, Akuti, Devahuti, and Prasuti. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Nena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamaya Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sadvatutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shiva Shakanvitanscha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Pranamami Hari Priye Vansha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Go Premanande Haribo. This section of Bhagavatam, just to create some context, is conversation between Vidura and Maitreya, and we follow it back. The third canto begins, well, the context of the third canto begins with the conversation of Vidura and Uddhava. And there's a way in which Uddhava, who is a confidential devotee of Lord Krishna, had gotten word that Krishna was going to leave the planet, so he went there to Dwarka to meet with him. That's the place where Krishna spoke the Uddhava Gita. And he had instructed Uddhava to go north to the, what's that place called? Huh? Badrigasham. Narayana Rishi, other sages there. He wanted to inform about the nature of his disappearance from this world, as well as other confidential matters. And although Maitreya felt dutiful, was dutiful and was on his way there, out of separation for Krishna, he came back and met Krishna again at Prabhas. And there he was instructed again by Krishna, who was contemplating leaving the world and who had orchestrated the ways in which his dynasty had departed, the details of which I won't go into now. And so he had full knowledge of Krishna's intentions, and at the same time Maitreya, by some previous accumulation of, as Prabhupada says, agyata sukriti, had been coming along that pathway and just happened to come across Krishna leaning against a young banyan tree with his right foot, his right ankle. He was leaning back in a contemplative mode. And Maitreya then sat in on the conversation and heard everything. Later, when Vidura met with Uddhava, he had requested him to instruct him to be a spiritual master. And Uddhava deferred by love, Maryada Vatikrama, not wanting to step over a senior devotee. Besides, he had to execute the order of Krishna and go to Badrikashram. And he asked him to, rather than take instruction from him, Uddhava, to meet Maitreya, who had just recently heard from Krishna. What's more, who is already a self-realized sage. And Vidura complied. Uddhava went to the north, and the conversation then between Maitreya and Vidura is what we're hearing. Vidura starts off by asking relatively basic questions. Prabhupada comments there that this is the nature of great sages, great personalities, Vaishnavas, who are always thinking about others and how they may gain context to the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. So asking the questions about creation, how did it all take place, was one of the questions that Vidura asked to Maitreya. And in following up with that, we're getting the steps. And Sariputta Prabhu, whom many of you might have heard of, a great scientist in our ISKCON society, when Prabhupada asked for the brightest and most educated, those who had studied science or had some advanced degree, they might come together in a group called the Bhaktivedanta Institute, and he put an edict out that in every temple they should try, the devotees there, to discover those types of qualified people. Sariputta was in New Vrindavan at the time, and people thought he was really bad at digging post holes. So they were surprised when, in the temple room one morning, they asked, is there anybody with an advanced degree? And when he raised his hand, they thought, how could he have an advanced degree? He can't even dig a post hole. Nonetheless, he emerged as one of the brilliant minds for all times of our ISKCON society. And in his dutiful research, ways to present Krishna consciousness so that people could understand the connection between Krishna consciousness, the Bhagavatam, and science, or the lack thereof, he had a mantra, which was, what are the steps? And in discussing the ways in which entities, according to some thesis, might evolve through mutation, he, for instance, in a mind experiment, dealt with a protozoan. Yeah, I know, what does this have to do with the text? I'm getting there. A protozoan that didn't have propellers. There are such things. And he was into mathematical biology, and therefore he showed the improbability of, in a given period of time, the mutations, a protozoan that mutated enough times and enough circumstances, and the circumstances that would have to be there to become an entity with a propeller. And he showed, as I just said, that the probability was 0. So in dealing with scientific conversations, or I should say in dealing with the other scientists of the world, and in talking about their theories, he would ask the question, what are the steps? Because as in the case of the protozoan, he had shown the steps ad infinitum or ad nauseum, and there's a way in which he came then to a very clear idea of what was possible and what wasn't. And we find in the Bhagavatam as well, the sages like Vidura, they would also like, for the benefit of the world, to know what the steps are. So one might just say, well, there was a creation. In fact, in science, there's an idea there was a big bang, a heated mass, and somehow it exploded, and it became all of us sitting here in Bhagavatam class. Or as Bhubaneswar Prabhu, the great sage who passed away during the pandemic in Vrindavan, he used to cook the Raj Bhog. Whenever I'd say, well, this is amazing prep, is there cashews in it? And he'd say, they fell in. Or he'd say, it happened by chance. And there was a joke, of course, he was perpetrating. There's a way in which, when people talk about creation, people think it fantastical because, well, how did it happen? Well, how did the humans come about, for instance? Because everyone's self-centered and wants to know, how did I get here? So this chapter tells about that. What are the steps? And in the beginning of the chapter, we have Brahma. And Brahma, of course, in context, we have in Brahma Samhita, Bhasvanya tasma sakaleshu nijeshu teja swayam kiyat prakatayat tabadat atra Ramai esha Jagadanda Vidhanakarta Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. Bhasvanya tasma sakaleshu nijeshu teja is described by Brahma himself. He's describing the entity Brahma, who's part of the creative process. And he's compared to a jewel who's reflecting the teja, Bhasvanya tasmas kalesha nijesha teja. He has power, he has light, creative power, and it's coming from Govinda. So he's manifesting in that way the various entities of the world. And we find also in the process of creation, as mentioned in various places, Brahma Samhita included Yakaranarna Bhajale Bhajati Niyoga, Nijam. Yakaranarna Bhajale Bhajati Niyoga, Sweet. What is the next line? Yeah, Brahmananda. Anyway, in that verse, it's describing how Mahavishnu gives the ingredients in Yashaika Nishvasiddhika Lamatava Lamya Jivanti Loma Vilaja Jaganandana. Vishnur Mahansa Iha Yasyakala Vishesho. Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. It's the way in which the Lord expands all of the ingredients and then enters within them in his various forms. The introduction to the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita also describes the unfolding of the Lord's energies, starting from Balaram, and then Shankarshan, Chaturvyuha, and into the various entities, including Brahma. And Brahma is there as an extension of Garbhodakshay Vishnu. And he's endowed with great power. The last verse of the Brahma Samhita is Krishna speaking. The last several verses is Krishna speaking. How does that last verse? No, not Shreya Kanta. The last verse is, look it up. In that verse also we find the description of how Brahma, and Krishna's encouraging him. He's saying that I'm endowing you with my power. Just give me the word. I want to quote the verse. Aham hi vishvasya charasya bijam pradhanam prakriti pumamscha maya idam teja idam vivarshi vide videhi tomato jaganti. This is a key verse in understanding this chapter. Aham hi vishvasya charasya. Krishna is saying that, speaking to Brahma before he's creating, that I am your support. Aham hi vishvasya charasya bijam pradhanam prakriti pumamscha maya idam teja idam. There it is again, teja idam vivanti. My teja, my power, I'm investing in you for you to create the universe. And Brahma's there as an instrument to use his creative power endowed by Krishna to create the world. And why is he creating the world in the first place? In Los Angeles once, somebody asked Prabhupada, well, if everyone takes to the path of renunciation, which for a brief second there in ISKCON looked like a possibility that might happen. And what might happen to the world, wouldn't everything wind down? And Prabhupada said, no, we want that. Nonetheless, as we know from these descriptions of the creative process, the Shrishti Lila, Shrishti Stiti Pralaya Sadhana Shakti Reka, the Shrishti Lila is one of the pastimes of the Lord, expanding the world, and part of it is to give facility, a sthanam, a facility for the living beings who have racked up unlimited debt, and then otherwise called karma. And they have to have a place to deal with that karma, to pay it off, although it's not possible because there's so much. And he creates that facility. It's also, as mentioned in the Prayers Personified Vedas, there's two purposes to the universe. One is to give facility to those who are stubborn about staying in the material world and want to try to enjoy the facility of the material world, for which we find in the beginning of this chapter that we're studying today, Brahma unwillingly or with great trepidation creates the various layers of illusion, which are sort of a virtual way that the living entity can forget himself and become more and more absorbed in matter. And then to give facility for the second cause of the universe, which is the living entities going back to Godhead, he manifests four Kumaras. There's sort of simultaneous purpose behind the four Kumaras in that he wants those sages to impart various aspects of knowledge. At the same time, he asks them to help populate the universe, but they're not willing to do that. And Brahma, being their father, and receiving a no from his first offspring, which Prabhupada goes to great lengths to describe as perfectly okay, because Devarshi Bhutatman Nrinam Pitrinam Kinkaro Nayam Ranicha Rajan Sarvatmaraya Sharanam Sharanyan Gato Mukundam Parihrita Kartam. If one is fully dedicated to Mukunda, then one doesn't have to pay one's debt to one's father or a long list of other people as well. Brahma nonetheless becomes angry, but he doesn't want to show it in front of his sons, and so he holds it in. You know how people say, don't hold it in, let it out. Came out in another way if you try to sublimate your anger. And it came out in the form of Rudra. Rudra then burst forth from Brahma, his next offspring. And Brahma tried to engage him. He did engage him. He gave him various places where he could reside. Unfortunately, Rudra especially is employed to destroy. And you see the anger element in Rudra is quite destructive. If you've ever seen a YouTube of somebody with road rage, they jump out with a baseball bat, not really thinking about what they're doing, and smash the other person's windshield in. Or try to bash the other car with their car, and they cause a lot more destruction than they needed to. They could have just said, I forgive you, and driven away. But when Rudra gets a hold, it's really hard to contain oneself. And Brahma also created the counterparts, the Shaktis for Rudra, got him married, so to speak, to these very Shaktis. This is in the creative process from Brahma, instilled in him, or how he's empowered by Krishna, which also brings up a point as we go along describing the unfoldment of the universe and the creative process, that creation isn't always clean and a clear path. We think forward to the 8th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, in the way in which when Krishna was enacting the churning of the milk ocean, I mean, this is practically cliche, but there's a way in which the poison came out. He had in mind creating nectar, and there were other kinds of auspicious and inauspicious entities that came out. It was a creative process between the demigods and demons, and then there was this, what was that poison called? Hala hala, you don't want that. That sounds bad, hala hala. Shiva saved the universe. But there were a lot of anomalies in the process of creating that yajna that Vishnu wanted. Even those who were involved got their limbs smashed. Of course, he brought them back to life, and they failed many ways again and again, and they were helped by Vishnu. So in any case, Brahma, what an amazing personality. He's the best of best. Those who follow Varnashram perfectly for 100 lifetimes get on the list, on the short list for becoming a Brahma. That's why he's known as Vidhi. He can really stick to the regulations. Nonetheless, in his process of creation, then he gets Rudra, and Rudra begins to destroy the universe. And so he asks Rudra to contain himself and only stay in certain places, which seem quite numerous. So Rudra's everywhere. And then he creates, and at this point, his creation is asexual, meaning from his body, by the power of Krishna, he's manifesting various entities. And he manifested 10 sages. And I won't name them all because I can't remember them, but Atri and Marichi and so forth. And then there's Narada, who is born from the best of Brahma's discrimination. And this is, as Brahma's creating the universe, the mixture of these two purposes of the universe, because many of these sages are especially expert at karma kanda and showing how to live in the world. But Narada, who's the best of the best, of all of the sages and of everybody else for that matter, is there to teach the path of bhakti. And Narada, he can engage human beings in the loving exchanges with Krishna. So that facility is there, along with the facility to know how to negotiate in the material world. Everyone okay so far? Keep going? Okay. Then he manifests the Vedic hymns, the hotas, the ways of performing Vedic yajna. He manifests varnashrama, which is really the prevalent theme of the entire culture, varnashrama. And each one of the divisions has a facility for those who are in that particular phase of life to remember the Lord as they're doing their work and following their proclivities in life. And then he manifests, does Brahma. What does he manifest next? Huh? Can't get the sign language. Yeah, that's where we are today. Lucky thing I got the book. So, Kayam. Kayam means now, actually there's a little nuance here because I skipped over the part about Vak. And in some millennium there was a story about Brahma becoming enamored of his daughter. The Acharyas point out it wasn't this Brahma, it was another Brahma, and the conclusion of that is to show the power of the material energy, that even a great soul like Brahma can be captured by the material energy. So it's a cautionary tale. Nonetheless, as is mentioned in the narrative of the story, he changed his body, which the Acharyas say he changed his disposition, but there's some indication of change of body. And the next body that he takes allows him to manifest Kayam, which Swayambhuvamanu and Swayambhuvamanu's female counterpart, Shatarupa. And that's the beginning of sexual procreation. Before that it was asexual. And those two, as is mentioned in the next verse, have offspring, 5 altogether, and they're famous because they're the beginning of the various dynasties that we hear about throughout the Bhagavatam manifests all the population. And that's where we came from. Om Tat Sat. So, facility. Krishna gives facility for everyone to either try to ensconce oneself in the material energy and pull the covers over their head and just be absorbed in the material energy. However, his ultimate purpose is to give an opportunity for everyone to realize the path of bhakti. Amongst the Vedas that I mentioned, Brahma manifested earlier, he also manifested the Puranas. And of course, we get, in the recent age, the essence of all the Vedas and all the Puranas in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And we also get the essence of the process through Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu of practicing all the Vedas through the Nam Sankirtan, which is available to everyone. And then here we are, connected to the line of Lord Chaitanya and the great Acharyas. So we have the opportunity to take the essence of the spiritual knowledge that Brahma manifested under the direction of Krishna, and make it available and take advantage of it ourselves and make it available to everybody in the world. And at this point, let's have a discussion. We still have 15 minutes, so you can bring up points, reflections, parts you think would be important to mention in the context, or if you have a question that you think is relevant, emphasizing that to the conversation, it might expand it in a helpful way, please feel free. I'll count down from 5. If you don't raise your hand, I'll start calling on you. Okay. Prabhu? We need tech support on aisle 3. Yeah.
Krishna Maharaj, thank you very much for the enlightening class. I have this doubt.
Face the mic towards you there.
Yeah, I have this doubt that Brahma has done this creation many times. He forgot, and then he's now Krishna instructs him, and then through the heart, and he gets the knowledge. So when he gets the knowledge of how to create, I'm sure that I'm thinking that he would have also understood what were the previous mistakes that he has done in the previous creations. Why does he go through this entire cycle of creating Chaturkumaras who will say no, and then creating Shiva? I mean, I'm just wanting you to elaborate on that if that is possible.
Oh, what do you do when you wake up in the morning? You're not the same person you were last night, and you have to put everything out in the road to remember, who was I again? Who am I? What was I doing? And of course, Brahma's the most brilliant of everyone, but by the power of the material nature, there's a way in which he goes through the troubleshooting process, bringing one after another. And it's also indicative, it's not entirely mechanical, because we're dealing with living beings. So if it's just mechanical, entirely mechanical, then everything would just be mechanical. But it's not. We're dealing with living beings, and that's one of the points I thought about in reading the chapters. Living beings are willful. So you may say, do this or do that, and then they may not do it. Or they may do it and then not do it later. And Brahma's duty is to find the ways and means to make sure it all works. To all managers out there, or parents, or anybody else who's living in a human body, life is a series of problem-solving events. Or is it just me? That get problems stacking up every day, and then I have to find the wherewithal to solve them. So there's an overtone. Maybe you turned it up because I wasn't close enough to the mic, but I'll get closer. And then you can turn it down. So we live in a bidimensional universe, soul, body, and the ways in which we have to negotiate, we have to navigate that are various, are myriad. Another question or comment? Yes.
Thank you, Prabhuji, for this wonderful discussion. Prabhuji, in the last you mentioned about Krishna providing facilities to everyone. So, as practicing devotees, we tend to use those facilities for service of the Lord. But in gradually, we tend to enjoy those facilities for our own sense gratification. And sometimes it is so subtle that we don't even realize that we have started enjoying these facilities. So, how can we identify those subtle things?
It's helpful to remember the basic principles of life, one of which is stated in the first verse of the Śrīdhāma, Ishavāsyam idam sarvam, yatkincha jagatyam jagat, tattena bhunjita, magradhakasya sudha. Everything animate or inanimate within the universe is controlled and owned by the Lord. One should therefore accept only those things necessary from oneself, which are set aside as one's quota, and one should not accept other things, knowing well to whom they belong. If I had kept my eyes closed, Radhika, during that, I would have got credit. If you're taking Bhakti Shastra, you know what that means. So, if we keep this in mind, which is what the Śrīdhāma asks us to do, we save ourselves a lot of trouble. And when we have that as the ethos of, for instance, if you start a community or a household or you have a project, we always start with, this isn't mine, this belongs to Krishna. And this is one of the ways in which Prabhupada trained everyone in our society to start with, these are not my things, they belong to Krishna. And he also took the role of the founder acharya. When somebody tried to take his name off it, take the founder Acharya label, he said, no, it has to be there because everything has to be lined up in the disciplic succession, so nobody feels that I'll just now deviate and use the facilities for myself. So this verse saves us all a lot of trouble, and we have to remind ourselves and one another as we move forward in service that it's not me, namaha. It's the tejas, the power of the Lord that's empowering us. And that's what a Vaishnava society is giving credit where credit is due. It's coming from Krishna. Isn't it? It's Vaishnavas if you say, okay, in San Francisco, circa 1973, Prabhupada was there. And in the room, somebody glorified Prabhupada, said, it's all your mercy. And Prabhupada slapped the table. And he said, it is not. It is the mercy of my Guru Maharaj. So this is the way of passing everything up to the proprietor of everything. My Guru, your Guru passes it up and it goes all the way back to Krishna. Yes? Right center field.
Thank you, Vaiśeṣika Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
We see that in this wonderful pastime of Brahma, that everything is, like Sadaputa said, His Grace Sadaputa Prabhu said, what are the steps? And the steps are carried out in an organized, systematic way, so that everything happens according to a plan. But today in society in general, we see that there's no plan, there are no steps, and there's chaos and confusion. That's why Srila Prabhupada said, I have come to give a head to society. But we also need arms, legs, etc., so that we can get to that place where everybody is following the path of Krishna consciousness and progressing on the goal of human life. So how do we get there? What are the steps?
How do you get where?
How do you get to that place where everything is organized and systematic, and then everyone gets an opportunity to progress towards the goal of human life?
Well, it's a caveat, and relating back to this story, with care and also with dealing with the problems that naturally ensue. If one thinks that I'll apply a principle, then it'll work perfectly every time, then we may be disappointed because we're dealing with people. So one of the ways I've found of enacting even simple principles and organizing one small community or a service that involves other devotees is to use the mantra, workarounds bring turnarounds. Although the idea is straightforward and we're going towards a certain goal, we have to learn to work around people's various natures. Otherwise, it becomes pedantic and difficult, therefore, to deal with living beings who have their own ideas. When Maitreya Rishi, one of the GBCs in the movement, complained to Prabhupada about all the discord amongst the leaders at that time, Prabhupada said, and he said, why, it's a spiritual movement, why isn't there Shanti? And everyone does everything correctly, according to the way it's written. And Prabhupada said, no, you're a Mayavadi. And he said, don't seek utopia, because even in the spiritual world there isn't utopia. He said, even in Goloka, sometimes Krishna accidentally milks a bull instead of a cow, because he gets enamored of Srimati Radharani's beauty. And he said, everyone is a living being and they all have their own impetuses. And therefore, we have to expect that people go in different directions. So, yes, we have to clearly enumerate the path and be clear on it. We also have to account for the fact that working with lots of living entities, or even one other living entity, if you have two people living in one house, do you all get along if you live with another person in your room or in your life? Only one person said no, everyone else has found utopia. So partly it's understanding that it can be a slightly messy process, and being willing to go on for the sake of the ultimate goal, and dealing with the various ways that people interact with people in seemingly strange ways. There's a lot more to be said about that, but that's my glib answer for now. Okay, I'll take one more, and then we have some gifts. Yes, Prabhu, nice to see you, Janmashtami. And Sachi Dulal, Prabhu, Hare Krishna.
One very significant instruction that Srila Prabhupada gave before he left was that you can show your love for me by how well you cooperate to keep this institution intact. So what maybe one answer to Sridevi Mataji's question is, if we really have Srila Prabhupada in our hearts, it'll be a lot easier to show our love for him. So in other words, Prabhupada's position in our movement has to be well recognized. He's the founder Acharya. He performed miracles for all of us, and he continues to do that through his Vani and his example. Just a quick comment.
Thank you. That's a really important comment. Just comment on your comment. Prabhupada mentioned before he left that if we take time to sit and read Srimad Bhagavatam together and discuss the topics, we would find ways to work together. And he also emphasized love and trust. Ultimately, MOUs, seeing a lot of MOUs. You know what that is? Memorandum of Understanding. You write one and then later on someone says, yes, but you didn't think of this. But when there's a feeling of love and trust between the devotees, which takes deliberate cultivation in a community, again, we're not mechanical, and the process is mechanical, then there's a natural way that we cooperate. And of course, that admonition that I mentioned before, that workarounds bring turnarounds, or that learn to work with other people's differences so that you can cooperate. So the principle you brought up is a guiding principle. Thank you very much. And Sachi for the last point.
When Srila Prabhupada was in Los Angeles giving morning lecture on one occasion, he was speaking about, and I refer to this because you mentioned that when Lord Brahma, in the process of creation, he also gave a pathway to make spiritual advancement, as well as to also get involved in material energy. So Prabhupada mentioned that the cowherd boys who were there engaging in pastimes with Krishna, they were elevated to that position after heaps of pious activities. And I would like to ask, he didn't say spiritual or material pious activities. I would ask you, what is your understanding, and what are those pious activities? Can you give examples of what those pious activities are?
Well, Krita Punya Punja is the last line. Satam. What's the next word? Itam Satam Brahma Sukhanda Bhutya. Dasyam Gatanam. Dasyam Katanam. Paradaivatena. Mayashitanam. Naradarakena. Sakam Vrija Rukrita Punya Punja. That's in the story of Aghasura. Shukadeva Goswami mentions that there are different people. Some pursue God in his majestic form. Some of them see him as Brahman. Others who are in Maya, they just see him as an ordinary human being. But Sakamvra Jaru Krita Punya Punja, they're these cowherd boys who are playing with Krishna. Who are they? He says Krita Punya Punja. As Prabhupada says in the Krishna book, they've accumulated heaps and heaps of pious credits. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains 3 divisions of the Sukriti, and he talks about Bhakti Unmukhi Sukriti. Bhakti Unmukhi Sukriti gives one a qualification for bhakti, and that primarily comes through sadhu sangha. And in sadhu sangha, satam, what's with me? Satam prasang Mama virya sambido bhavanti hritkarna rasayana kata. So there's a way in which when you're in the association of sadhus, you hear this Shinvatam swakata Krishna punya shravana. Punya, there it is again. It's a kind of spiritual accumulation which is Krishna. Everything's Krishna. And Krishna's there within the heart personally. He notices that we have an inclination towards him and he's just waiting for that. And then he helps to purify the heart. And when we met pure devotees, it's even better. Because better than meeting Krishna. Because they have something in their hearts that is even more valuable. Bhavad vida bhagavatas tirta bhuta swayam vibho tirta kurvanti tirtani swantaksnena gadambhuta. I got one. Try to win one for the Gipper. So the bhaktas, they carry love for Krishna in their heart, and if you get association with them and you hear from them, then the process of devotional service begins. And if you're attentive to it, Prabhupada mentions in the verse Brahmanda Brahmate Kon Bhagyavan Jeev Guru Krishna Prasadi Pai Bhakti Lakta Bij. What is the Bhakti Lakta Bij? It's one's connection with the sound vibration, the teachings of a pure devotee who has love for Krishna in his or her heart, and then one's willingness to adhere to it. And that's the bij. And from that, one gets the qualification to engage in bhakti. And I'm going to say more than that, because then you get into is the jiva here forever or not? It's always great in the last minute of class to bring that up. So, anyway, it was a discussion, and this chapter is oceanic, as all chapters are, and I'm really thankful for have had the opportunity to be here and discuss it. And thank you for your kind attention. It was noticeable. And now, to try to express my gratitude, I have a free gift for everyone. I hope you like it. I hear they're behind me. Okay. 3 things for everybody? 3 gifts for everybody. Let me tell you what you've won. A ball of tilak, and I figure that's perennial because I've given out tilak before. I always like getting tilak. Do you like it? Yes. Yeah, if you wear tilak, you can always use that. Then I've got a lollipop. It's offered to Krishna. We've been giving them out all over Bengal. And also, we have a wristband that you can wear proudly wherever you go and show your team spirit. So I'm going to finish now by thanking you again and offering my humble obeisances. Vansha kalpadrivishcha kripasanave vichakvatitanam pavanebhyo vishnavebhyo namo namah. And I'm going to walk behind here and start passing out free gifts to all my friends. Hare Krishna.
Vaiśeṣika Maharaj ki jai. Prabhupada ki jai.